So in the previous lecture, we learned that we can open Cypress via following command. So we know that this specific command will open Cypress. And if you're opening Cypress for the first time, when the test runner opens, it will present you with a list of tests. So as you can see, the test runner is currently open. And if we look at the following, we can see that there's a folder called Integration Tests. At the same time, we can see that there's another folder called Examples, and then we're presented with a list of tests. So what Cypress does is when you open Cypress for the first time, it already has demo tests that it will add to your framework. If we look at the following tests here, and then if we navigate back to our project, you will see that there are new folders listed. So currently, we're going to just look at the integration folder. In another lecture, I'll be covering what is the purpose of each of the other folders. For the time being, what we're going to do is open up the integration folder, and then if we open up our runner, and we compare them with each other, you can see that all of the example tests listed here are visible within our integration folder. So for example, with actions.spec.js, if I click on this file, you can now see the contents of this specific test. As you can see cy.visit, cy.get, etc. So these are pre-constructed demo tests created by Cypress. So whenever you open Cypress for the first time, it's going to create the following folders. So it's going to create a folder structure for your framework, and it's also going to add demo tests to your project. So now let's execute one of these example tests. So what I'm going to do is click on actions.spec.js. So double click it, and now we will see the tested action. Okay, so as you can see now, it's executing the test. You can see at the same time, this is the system application under test. And on the left-hand side, you can see it's performing individual tests. So as you can see, currently they're all passing. We've got no failures. And at the top, you can see that 14 tests have passed. So if we go back to our project, you can see that one of the tests was the following. So it's using Mocha. Again, this is going to be covered in a later lecture, so don't worry too much. This is just to give you a quick overview. Here's another test, and here's another test. So now we know what happens when we open Cypress for the first time, and we've also had an overview of the test runner. Now let's have a look at Cypress's official documentation. So if we access the following URL, I've also added this URL to the lecture resources in case you don't want to type out the full URL. So if we look at this specific page and refer to the following image, we can see it gives you a brief explanation of the key features of the test runner. As you can see, there's an option there that shows you the test status. So for example, how long it has taken to execute your test suite. You can see the number of passed and also failed tests. If we look on the left-hand side, we can see the command logs. So for example, whenever Cypress executes a command, you're going to see the output within the test runner. We can see that there's also a preview URL. So that's the URL of the system where you're running your test against. There's an option to change viewport sizes. And finally, you'll see your application. So you get a preview of your app when you're running your tests against that given app. So you get to see the output of you running and triggering your tests against your target system. So we scroll down, it provides you with some more information. So for example, visiting a given URL and also performing an assertion. And if we scroll down further, you can see that when an error occurs, Cypress's test runner will also indicate why a specific step within your test has failed. So I recommend for you to quickly run over this documentation, and then we will continue looking at the test runner in more detail. Now we're going to look at the test runner in more detail. So previously, we triggered the actions.spec.js test file. And as you can see, I still have the runner open, and it's still showing us the previous test results. So first thing to note, at the top, you can see that there's 14 tests have the tick icon. So 14 tests have passed, and there's been no failures. Each individual test is listed, as you can see. If we click on a given test, it's going to provide us with information about the specific actions performed in that given test. For example, if I click on the click test, you can see it's accessed the following URL. It's located the following selector or element on the web page, and then it's performed a click against that specific element. So this is really, really useful when trying to debug your tests. For example, if we had a failure, you would see the point of failure, and you could also see which specific step of a given test has failed. And it will also add an exception message. So we move on now. We take a look at, for example, the following icon here. That enables you to disable auto-scrolling. We can even rerun the entire test suite if we click on the following button. And there's another key thing to note, actually, is you can see the amount of time it's taken to execute all of the tests. So now if we move to the middle of the panel, you can see that, first of all, it's showing us a URL. So this is the URL of the application under test. So if I click on this URL, it's going to take us to the system which we're currently testing. If I go back to our runner, you can see there's a little toggle icon here. So this is another great key feature of Cypress. Cypress will create selectors for us. So if I click this icon, and if I select the email text field, you can see that Cypress has provided us with the ID of that given selector. So now if I go back and use the following icon, so enable it, so it's highlighted in dark blue, and then go over the disable text field, again, you can see it's created another selector for us. And if I use this option here, copy command, what that will do is, so if I, for example, let's scroll up to the top of our test actually, if I paste that specific selector, you can see it's also appended CY, the selector, and then close it round brackets. So now I can perform, for example, Cypress commands against that generated selector. So this is a great feature of Cypress. It will create selectors for you. However, key note, sometimes these selectors may not be the best optimized, so sometimes you might have to manually create your selectors, but this will also be covered in later lectures. Okay, so we scroll to the right-hand side, we can also see dimensions. So the dimensions of what we run in our test as, so 1000 times 660. And then this specific panel here provides us with the system that we're currently testing. So we can still interact with the system. For example, if I disable the selector option, you can see that I can still interact with a text field or interact with the website and even open Chrome Developer Tools if required. So we can still do the standard stuff that we would normally do when opening a given web page inside our browser. And the final thing to note is you can see here it's got before and after. So before, it shows you the states. So for example, if we, let's say, go to a type test, so for example, before, it intends to interact with this text field. So if I've selected the before, so before it's going to run the type command. It's showing, okay, I want to interact with this specific text field, so it's showing a red icon. Now, if I click after, you can see it's now typed the text which was provided within our test case. So that's another great key feature of the runner. It shows you states when performing Cypress commands such as type, etc. So have a play around with the runner yourself, and I will see you in the next lecture, 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 in the next lecture.